Hey everyone. There's an event that happened today that is getting a lot of attention on social media and in the news. If I search in Clarity Act on X, I get a lot of dialogue that the Clarity Act today has been canceled. What is going on is that this Clarity Act was going through the Senate and it was to have a vote today on its current writing. And the Democrats submitted a lot of last-minute revisions that the Republicans were not in agreement with. And the arguments between these two groups is significant enough that they have canceled today's vote. And this is perhaps of interest to you because a lot of people in crypto have been pointing to the Clarity Act as the last milestone needed in order for crypto adoption to finally happen. Once we get regulatory clarity from the Clarity Act, then crypto will succeed, something along those lines. And so there's been a lot of fuss around the Clarity Act. As you guys may know, I used to look at crypto regulation all day, every day, and I've written some myself. So I thought I'd give you my take on this now. So what has happened? The Digital Asset Market Clarity Act was scheduled to receive a vote today from the Senate Banking Committee. It was to be the most comprehensive legislation covering, people think it's about regulatory clarity, it's about allowing institutions to use crypto. It's not this. It is the United States legal, political, and economic system trying to figure out how to engage with decentralized technology. That's fundamentally what's going on here. And this legislation was to be the most comprehensive set of rules to date about how the US government and all that it regulates interacts with decentralized technologies. What has happened instead, a vote did not happen today. Instead, the Dems and the Republicans have argued their way into an impasse, and like I said, I'm here to explain why and what that means for the market. The Dems introduced very aggressive language last minute, and the Republicans refused to proceed with it, and it's so much work to solve these differences that they've decided we're not going to vote today. The big disagreements are around what stablecoin providers are allowed to do versus banks, and what on-chain protocols, DeFi, primary markets, that stuff that we connect our wallet to and use, what those things can do versus what banks can do. The core disagreement, the core of all of this, is whether people can be trusted to make their own economic decisions. People who are pushing for stable coins, on-chain protocols, they're saying, yes, people can make their own decisions. And banks and others who are pushing for more regulation are saying, no, this is too much liberty and we need to add in safeguards. Let's talk about what let's talk about what the Clarity Act actually says. My version of it, right? Like I strip out a lot of stuff and I'm just trying to go to the meat and vegetables that is important for a crypto investor who is crypto native. So you're not a casual Coinbase user, you're somebody like us, you're listening to me, who's trying to go into this market more deeply. Well, a couple months ago when I was also commenting on regulation, I said the effect of the bill will be the inverse of its title. I love that rule of thumb because it's true. The Clarity Act does not give clarity. Up until the Clarity Act, or historically, regulation of crypto has been fought for between the SEC and the CFTC. You would ask the question, is Bitcoin a security or a commodity? People generally now say that Bitcoin is a commodity and therefore under CFTC. Well, what about Ether, like Ethereum? Is it a security or a commodity? Lots of people now say commodity, but Gary Gensler, the last SEC chair, said that Ethereum is a security, and I, as a securities attorney, I actually agree, and I know why precisely he's saying that, and I think the legal argument for that is sound. But I don't say that because I don't like a lot of securities laws to begin with, and I don't want Ether to be regulated as a security. But I do agree with the logic of his argument. And then how about TRX? Like TRX of the Tron network, like is that a security or is that a commodity? Like I would also argue it's a security. Some, like Justin Sun, the CEO of Tron, who issued and created TRX, he would say it's a commodity, or neither, because he doesn't want CFTC regulation. Well, this mess, the Clarity Act is attempting to sort, which it is not able to do because you can't just organize crypto like this. I'll get into why in a moment. The Clarity Act attempts to sort all crypto into 3 categories and 3 regulators. So you've got the digital commodities, like people would say Bitcoin and probably Ether. The CFTC regulates them, and you could define them as crypto assets that have mature blockchains. And there's no centralized control group. For example, who is the CEO of Bitcoin? There isn't one, so there's no centralized control group. There's lots of flaws with this. You would point to the groups of miners that produce the Bitcoin. It's an aside, but I'm just kind of poking holes in the definition. Then you've got restricted digital assets. So these are basically going to be regulated as securities. The regulator is the SEC. What is a restricted digital asset? Well, it's a crypto asset or digital asset issued for fundraising that remains under the control of a central entity or developer group. So any of these early stage assets that we're looking at where they've been issued so that the developers can raise money to build out the protocol, SEC is regulating that. Then you've got payment stablecoins. And stablecoins are going to be regulated by the federal banking agencies, which you can like summarize as like the comptroller. Yeah. One thing that this act does is it introduces the maturity test, which means that when a blockchain is grown up and it no longer relies on its original developers, the crypto asset morphs from being a security to a commodity and is then regulated more lightly. For example, when Ethereum started, it was a security because it had controllers like Vitalik Buterin and the Ethereum Foundation. But now Ethereum has grown up, and now there's many developers around the world contributing to the Ethereum network, and so now it's transitioned into a commodity, the crypto asset. Because the software, the protocol, the network does not have a centralized controller, there's not a CEO of Ethereum, that changes the crypto asset Ether from security to commodity. And they've actually given like factors and characteristics of when a blockchain is mature. No single person, group, or entity under common control can own or control more than 20% of the total outstanding supply of the asset. So under this definition, like XRP is now a security. So in order to have XRP, you need to submit all that information, and every item of XRP needs to be identified and registered with your address. Like it's insane. This is intended to prevent whales or founders from manipulating the market or governance of the protocol. So that's one factor. The blockchain, when it's mature, must demonstrate that the original developers no longer possess privilege rights or the unilateral authority to alter the network's code or economic model. Functional utility, the value of the token must be substantially derived from its use within the network rather than from the entrepreneurial efforts of others. So you would say that the value of Ethereum comes from, the value of Ether is because you use it to pay for transaction fees rather than the entrepreneurial efforts of others. But it's it doesn't really make sense, because why are you going to pay fees for something unless it's useful? What makes it useful? The entrepreneurs. So it's just this looping definition. And like I'm very particular about this, and I do stand on this because I'm one of the few people who has gone very deeply into the rules and then also into the technology. And these awkward rules that are so smudgy it all proves the point I'm always trying to make. Like countries are, like government, like financial regulation as we know it, are a square peg, and decentralized technology is a round hole. Like Ethereum and Bitcoin at its core is designed to not be regulated. That is its purpose. Because if it was regulated, you could just do it on a private database like Amazon Web Services. And that is why this is so awkward and why regulation for crypto never comes out. It is trying to design water not to be wet. Or that's maybe not the best analogy, but you're trying to get my point here. So here's the political divide between Republicans and Democrats, and they both miss the point, but they miss the point coming at it from different angles, and this is maybe helpful context for you. So the Republicans, these are leaders like Tim Scott, they say that the Clarity Act is a matter of national security and economic sovereignty. They say that the SEC, under Gary Gensler, the previous administration, punishing these crypto developers has driven crypto developers offshore to other countries, and now they're going to become more competitive than the United States. This is actually partly true. Developers have gone offshore, but anything useful in crypto is de facto global by nature. So the value accrual should be happening on chain, but the developers are, which is global, but the developers are perhaps from Argentina or Sweden or whatever. So this is partly true. The Republicans want on-chain developers protected, so people who are building these protocols. And the Republicans say that these developers are not banks, and so the software that these developers are building should not be regulated like banks because they're not banks. It's just permissionless code. We just deploy the code and then anybody can use it. Republicans saying that they want on-chain developers protected is true, but not because it's different from banks. Like Aave, Morpho, many of these protocols that have been built by on-chain developers, they do function a lot like banks. But I agree with the Republicans that they shouldn't be regulated by banks because banking regulation in its current state is not good. Now, I'll just acknowledge right away that being in the camp of banks should be regulated less is a very small camp, and I think I'm like maybe in one of 1,000 people who is in that camp, and so I'm not going to try and win that battle, but it is the truth. A lot of regulation needs to be removed from our financial networks, which is why crypto was created in the first place. It is a technological solution to that which the politicians are not willing to do. Now, let's go to the Democrats. Democrats also missed the boat, but while the Republicans have like the right outcomes, their reasoning is flawed. The Democrats have bad reasoning and bad outcomes. So Maxine Walters, Elizabeth Warren, they say crypto in all its forms, whether it's a secondary market like Coinbase or the OG decentralized asset like Bitcoin and everything in between, it all harms the consumer and helps terrorists. They want stablecoins regulated. They don't want stablecoin issuers like Circle or Tether paying interest. And while they're at it, we may as well tightly regulate banks too. I know Elizabeth Warren wants much tighter regulation on everything. And that's because the Democrats generally operate under this assumption that regulation makes the market safer for the consumer. And we also, when we hear that, tend to believe that because of the terms used. But I always like to prove this point. If I said censorship makes the market more efficient, censorship makes the market more inefficient, which harms the consumer, that doesn't sound ridiculous to you, but it's basically the same thing. I just changed the conclusion. Regulation and censorship is the same thing. And like safer and inefficient is the same thing. So, yeah. quoting Maxine Waters here, passing the Clarity Act as currently written would make Congress complicit in an unprecedented wave of financial corruption. So she's like so against crypto, really against it. Now, why are they at this impasse on this thing that should have been going through today? Well, their difference in perspective is reflected in how they want to change this legislation. There's a lot of things going on here, but I'm going to narrow it to DeFi specifically because for us, this is what we care about. We're crypto native investors. Earlier this month, in a leaked proposal, Democrats sought to rewrite the definition of digital asset intermediaries. If determined to be a digital asset intermediary, under this new definition, you're going to be subject to the Bank Secrecy Act. The way that the Democrats have proposed to define digital asset intermediary means every developer who's building on a blockchain is a digital asset intermediary, meaning that every developer is now responsible for KYC and AML, along with the specific financial information and reporting on each individual on a blockchain or their wallets, and then taking those real-world identities and reporting that to the government. So all of your financial information tied to where you live, hopefully no one finds that information interesting if you self-custody. So what this does is it ends DeFi functionality as we know it, because tools like Aave, Uniswap, you name it, everything that we use is no longer going to allow us to just use it. Before we connect the wallet, we're going to have to like KYC ourselves, which you think, that seems fine. I don't mind KYCing, showing my passport or my driver's license, taking a selfie. I don't mind. But then all those assets are now tied to that ID. And so when I try and go and put those assets to another protocol, into a liquidity pool, through a decentralized exchange, unless that other person hasn't been KYC'd, AML, they're not going to be on that platform. And so when you KYC, AML everybody, and all assets are tied into an individual, and they can only move once people have complied with certain safeguards and permissions, you just get banking again. Like, it's just the same thing. And all of that is technically possible. Like, we can make DeFi that way, but if we do, it just becomes banking again, and so it's like, who cares? It's just the same thing. And I put this in italics because I want you guys to understand, much of the poor innovation in banking is due to regulation, not legacy tech. They stick on the legacy tech because the regulation embeds them into it. There is a reason why the most heavily regulated industries are the most slowest to innovate: banking, healthcare. So if you bring regulation to DeFi, it's just going to turn into our banking system, which at the highest level is like, fine, whatever. But if you're here and you're listening to me and you're a bit like me in this mindset, you really like some of the attributes of DeFi, and just going back to banking would be boring. So these proposals from the Dems was a big no-go with the crypto advocates like Coinbase, DeFi Education Fund, and also, of course, the Republicans who are being funded by these bodies. Here are the good guys. We love these guys. Blockchain Association and DeFi Education Fund, Yield School has donated to these guys, and we will continue to do so. They fight a good battle. Coinbase, they're a centralized exchange, so you might be surprised that they're supporting DeFi. But Coinbase and Brian Armstrong, they are crypto OGs, and they recognize that in order for crypto to be useful, and in order for new assets to come onto their exchange that people are going to want to trade and pay them trading fees, if DeFi is like banking, none of that stuff is going to come. If DeFi is like TradFi, none of that stuff is going to come. And so Coinbase knows that if they keep DeFi free, new interesting assets are going to be created, which they can then list, and then list for trading and make fees. Coinbase is actually a fantastic company, even though we kind of crap on them a lot because they're a secondary market and they are often a pain to use. Their ethics are good. So Paradigm is a VC fund, and then there's the Crypto Council for Innovation. These are all good guys. They got big bags. They do a lot of lobbying, and they are, in my opinion, fighting the good fight. So the bad guys, I wonder who this could be. The Bank Policy Institute, they represent the largest US banks. They really hate that stablecoin issuers can pay their users interest or fees. Your USDT pays you 4%. They argue that these rewards are just interest by another name, and that's true, it is. But they don't like that crypto is going to get an unfair advantage over regulated banks. And I understand the banks on that. My point is the banks should be regulated less, so that way it's not an unfair advantage. They're on even playing field. And again, that's the point. The technology is meant to do what the legacy restricted industry cannot. That's always the point of new technology, to be an improvement on the previous way of doing things. The American Bankers Association, and then of course, Elizabeth Warren. Yeah. I think this thing not going through today is a benefit. I think it's a W, I think it's a win. DeFi, the primary markets, on-chain protocols, everything that is you going to the blockchain directly, it's working fine. Without any regulation, without any bill, everything is improving at the deepest fundamental level. Stablecoin adoption, transactions across decentralized exchanges, new assets, developers, and when you zoom out, I know it doesn't feel like it sometimes, but when you zoom out on a multi-year basis, the value, the asset value and the prices are just up and to the right. Like everything about it is improving without regulation. This stuff is not like needed at the fundamental level. Regulatory proposals like the Clarity Act is politicians and their voters grappling with this technology that they have limited control over. I would honestly analogize it like an alien invasion. Republicans are saying, let's join this alien force, they could help us. And the Democrats are saying, no, they're obviously tricking us and they're gonna take over our planet. And they are both a bit right. Democrats are right in that the current institutions should be worried. It is not friendly, it is competitive. And the Republicans are right that they should be open-minded and respond productively to that competition rather than trying to censor it. You, as one of these aliens who like being in DeFi, your mindset should be, I don't really care what these guys think. I'm going to do my own thing in this infrastructure and do my best to transition with it as I go into the future. I think that the stalling of this bill, rather than being an impediment to adoption, is actually a great thing. I think it's going to give more time to on-chain developers to not worry about Elizabeth Warren coming in and putting them in jail for building something like Uniswap. And it just gives them more time to just continue building and being engineers. And for us, that's fantastic.